Hello and welcome to our daily roundup of the latest news from the 33rd Africa Cup of Nations. It was a day marked by gaffes in Cameroon, where all 24 teams have now made their debuts. The clash of the Eagles, Mali and Tunisia, was overshadowed by referee blunders. Mali was leading 1-0 after Ibrahima Koné's successful penalty, but the game ended in confusion when the ref blew the whistle too early, robbing the Tunisians of stoppage time while Mali was down a player. Well, to talk through the day's events, I'm joined by our sports editors, Simon Harding and James Vasina, who are covering the tournament for us in Cameroon. James, we're going to start with you. You were at today's game in Limbe between Mali and Tunisia. What happened?
Yes, absolutely, Alison. What happened? Absolute confusion. When the referee blew his whistle, the first thing that I did is I looked at my watch, thinking, this is a little bit early. And I looked at the person next to me as well. He didn't know what was going on. So, and at that point, there was just a lot of chaos that just started going on in the stadium, quite a bit of an uproar. And then the game resumed. It resumed, but just for a few minutes again, before being stopped by the referee, what felt like a pretty early time. At that point, as you can imagine, the Tunisian side was very angry, with members from the team and the coaches running onto the pitch, going to see the referee, demanding an explanation and just furious at what had happened. Now, the referee had to be escorted out of Limbe's stadium, but of course, this just meant that we had no idea at this point still what was going on, because the thing is that in the stadium in Limbe, there was none of that official time that was available for us to see. It wasn't up there on the display, unlike for people who were watching from home. So that just added more to the chaos for all of us. Now, of course, after that, they then went into the press conference and they announced that they were going to resume the game. That didn't happen, but I suggest just take a listen to what the Tunisian officials had to say after the game.
He denied us practically 7 or 8 minutes of added time. At that point, we were playing 11 against 10. We had the upper hand, we had the momentum. His decision is inexplicable. I can't understand how he made it. I guess we'll see what happens now.
Look, I'm not sure that they had much of a chance of getting really back into the game because they really struggled today. But what's for sure is that Gianni Sikwazi, the referee, he took that decision, a decision that baffled everyone. And you have to say, though, that the laws of the game when it comes to when you can start, when you can stop a game are very complicated. But in the end, it is the referee's decision. But the question, of course, remains is what is going to happen next? Well, we tried to speak to Patrice Motsepe after the game, the head of the African Football Federation. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get a word from him, but hopefully we'll hear from him in the coming days here on the channel on France 24, just to hear a bit about his reaction and what he believes that should happen and what the causes perhaps were. Was it a technical difficulty? Because, of course, this could maybe be down to human error. We don't know at this point. The referee himself, he had been suspended a couple of years ago. That was for allegations of corruption, but we're not going to speculate that anything happens there for now. Of course, everything's still unclear. It's all very fresh. But what we do know is that the Tunisian side is, of course, gutted and feel robbed from a few extra minutes of, as they say, possibly equalising, but of course they were denied an equaliser in that second half after a brilliant stop from a penalty on Mali's side. So a difficult day for them, and one that's really going to be a really hard time for them to digest as they open their campaign here in Cameroon at the African Cup of Nations.
And James, you mentioned that we're waiting for a response from the African Football Confederation. Let's take a look at the bigger picture now with Simon. Simon, what does this mistake mean for African football's governing body?
Well, the reality, Alison, is that it's simply a very embarrassing moment for CAF because Patrice Motsepe has made it one of the pillars of his new presidency of the African Confederation of Football that he wants to eradicate corruption. He wants to make CAF a very serious, commendable and organisation, a clean organisation. And this simply does not show that. Now, as James mentioned, Mr. Sikazwe is a referee who had already been accused of corruption in 2018. 2017, and he's a referee, though, that you would say has plenty of experience because he also refereed 2 matches at the World Cup in 2018 in Russia. But this is simply not good enough for one of the biggest tournaments on the planet. Now, what we need to look at now is to see exactly what the reaction is going to be, because Tunisia have appealed the decision and want the match to be replayed. Of course, Mali aren't going to wait for that. And it puts CAF in a sticky position because they're going to have to react quickly against one of the biggest, most powerful federations on the continent, which is Tunisia, and one of the rising confederations, which is Mali. And all in all, this is an image that will be played across the world. Social media is alight with the video of the referee stopping the game twice. And as former Cameroonian international player Patrick Mboma said, it is a very hurtful episode for African football.
It's pretty incredible what we saw today. The one person who is going to go down in the history of African football is the referee, Mr. Sikadzwe, who was catastrophic. African football didn't necessarily make a good name for itself with this episode.
All right, we're going to move on from that Tunisia-Mali game and cross back over to James to talk about the day's other Group F game between Mauritania and the Gambia. Now, James, that actually saw more embarrassment for AFCON officials because the wrong anthem got played for Mauritania. They played the country's old one from before it got changed in 2017. James, you could call that a bad omen for the Mauritanians because they ended up losing the game 1-0 to newcomers, the Gambia. It is, though, a very exciting debut for them.
Absolutely, Alison. I don't really like using the word historic too much because it does get overused, but I think it's fair to say that this is a day that many Gambians will remember. Of course, they're beginning their first ever campaign in the tournament and beginning on a high. This thanks to a brilliant goal and just everything was playing well for them. Can they keep it up in the days to come? Now, other teams, of course, have much more experience. For them, it's an all-new path, but there's, of course, plenty of hope for them still in this after a brilliant opening game for the Gambia.
James, we're going to let you get to bed now. It's been a long day. Thank you so much for being with us. We're going to cross back to Simon, who's going to tell us about the day's final match between Ivory Coast and Equatorial Guinea from Group E. Now, Ivory Coast has won AFCON twice. The last time was in 2015. And this year, they're starting off pretty well as well, aren't they?
A very important start for the Elephants and a flying start to the competition, Alison. That's the simplest way to put it. Max-Alain Grado, the captain of Ivory Coast, scoring after just 5 minutes with an absolutely stunning volley to sink their opponents. It was a very difficult match for the Ivory Coast in general against Equatorial Guinea. Very physical game, but they were in control for most of the match. They scored the early goal. Equatorial Guinea struggled to really create many clear-cut chances, and the Elephants were able to control the game. There were some contentious moments either side of half-time. Just before the interval, Equatorial Guinea should have probably been awarded a penalty for handball, which wasn't given by the referee despite a VAR check. And just after the break, Equatorial Guinea had a few opportunities, some very dangerous opportunities, but Ivory Coast were able to weather out that storm. I must say that Eric Bailly, the Manchester United centre-back, was simply immense for the Ivory Coast, really marshalling the back four and making sure that by and large they had a nice calm afternoon. And the introduction of fellow Premier League man Wilfried Zaha added a lot of attacking impetus. On the other hand, it was a little bit of a disappointing performance and match for Sébastien Haller, the Champions League top scorer so far this season with 10 goals in the European elite competition, yet he wasn't able to have any impact on the game. Patrice Baumel, who was assistant coach when the Elephants won in 2015, is going to have to try and up the Ivory Coast's tempo, because let us not forget they are in a group with defending champions Algeria, and we've seen that Sierra Leone, who they play next, are very adept at marshalling their pack, being very organised, and they're going to have to guarantee that they win that one to avoid a touch and go match with Algeria on the final day of the group stages.
Right, Simon. Well, that did wrap up today the first round of the group stage. And on Thursday, we get the second round of matches, starting with Group A. Hosts Cameroon will automatically qualify for the next round if they beat Ethiopia. Now, Ethiopia had a disappointing first match, losing 1-0 against Cape Verde. Earlier this week, Simon spoke to Ethiopia's team psychologist and analyst, and they told him about how the conflict at home has been impacting the team's play and what their strategy against Cameroon's star forward Vincent Aboubakar is going to be.
Our belief is in our way of play, in our style. So we don't assign any person for him, for Aboubakar, but we will try to manage him through our play, our style of play. By possessing the ball, we're going to manage him.
We know that what is happening in our country, so the players are very much eager to win a game, to give some positive emotions back home, to give some energy for the peoples around Ethiopia, so that I think it gives us a little bit advantage, so that the energy, we do have extra motivation than other countries in order to give something better at this tournament, because we need it very badly.
All right, well, Simon, before we head into that second round of group games tomorrow, can you give us some of your main takeaway from this first round of group games?
Well, it's not been a very spectacular start to this Africa Cup of Nations, Alison. 12 games, 12 goals, so not a lot of action in front of goal, it must be said, in that sense. But of course, this might be simply down to the fact that some of the smaller teams like Sierra Leone, like the Gambia, have overperformed, have performed above expectations. Who would have thought that Sierra Leone, for example, would have drawn against Algeria? The odds for that happening ahead of the tournament were simply unimaginable. So that is one of the big takeaways from this first week. Now, of course, Algeria themselves not winning is a big surprise. They're going to have to up their level. As we said, Jamel Belmadi's been very clear that he expects his players, his team to perform much, much better and put their chances away. In terms of the team that's impressed the most, then that perhaps goes to Nigeria, the Super Eagles, who blew Egypt away in their match. And all of this, bearing in mind, they still don't have their star striker, Victor Osimhen. They're without Emmanuel Dennis. So a lot of names missing for Nigeria. And yet, despite changing their coach just a month ago, they produced a quality of game and a quality of a performance that really raised some eyebrows. And Nigeria, who perhaps weren't considered one of the favourites ahead of the tournament, will certainly are one now at the end of this first round of group fixtures. But let us be careful. Of course, they have to back that up now. They have to confirm that performance with another good result. And we know that the Africa Cup of Nations can have plenty of surprises in store. Alison, as you mentioned, the next game, Cameroon against Ethiopia. That'll be back in the capital, Yaoundé, and the France 24 team will be there to bring you all the latest from the Group A.
That's right, Simon. You'll be bringing us all of the surprises still to come. Thank you so much for that look ahead to the next round. That brings us to the end of today's wrap-up of the Africa Cup of Nations. Thank you very much for joining us. We will be back on Thursday evening with the team at around 11:40 Yaoundé and Paris time with all of the latest news. Until then, do stay tuned for more news here on France 24.